Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. The F1 schedule is heating up. Will you go with the reliable and Max Verstappen, or take your chance with a potential surprise? Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code you see at the bottom of your screen somewhere, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well, as it really helps us grow the show. You can also watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. Today, we're talking IndyCar, and joining me from Sky Sports F1, covering IndyCar, it's Tom Gaymor. Tom, how are you?
Tim, thank you very much for having me. I'm suitably tired, actually, because it is, of course, post the month of May, and we've just had the Detroit Grand Prix. So I'm off the back of a pretty busy few weeks.
So how does that work for yourself? You're covering, I'm assuming, every single IndyCar race for Sky Sports this season.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, Sky has the rights for Formula One, and then we piggyback off the back of their channel. So it's just a wonderful tie-up that Sky have with NBC, and we're able to show the IndyCar. But as you'll know, when you watch the IndyCar on NBC, there's a large number of commercials. Now, we go in the UK on F1 or whatever the motorsport, commercial-free completely throughout the race. So nice. We apply that to IndyCar as well, and there's no international feed. So when the NBC team, so when Lee, T-Bell and Hinch go for a break, I will step in and cover that. So our viewers will stay on the race and the pictures, and then you'll have my content. And I just try and explain things, because obviously IndyCar is very, very different to Formula One, and it's a sort of US sport. So we've got a huge community here, a massive fan base, but we're growing that. So we serve the existing fan base, but we try and explain things for the new fans as well.
So you've commentated on a lot of different types of racing and motorsports. What are your thoughts on IndyCar?
So for me, and I'm not being biased because I'm covering IndyCar at the moment, I genuinely think it's the greatest series in the world at the moment, in terms of not just the jeopardy and the excitement and that sort of crescendo of entertainment that IndyCar tends to deliver throughout a race, but the strength in depth. I mean, you've only just got to look at last weekend. It's almost not impossible, but it's so hard to predict the top 12. And then, never mind the Fast Six. I mean, who was not going to make the Fast Six? It's so hard to predict who's going to be where. And that's what makes it fascinating for me. And you hear the drivers now, they're resigned to the fact that if they just miss the bubble, that they're not even going through the group stage in qualifying.
Yeah, it's crazy just how close. I mean, I've always found with IndyCar, I used to race in Champ Car Atlantics, but I've always found, with that conversion into IndyCar, the gap between first to 20th is separated by 5/10, 6/10, and it's just so competitive. Watching, Will Power not getting into the Fast Six is shocking to me, because that guy is
right?
top line. Yeah, he's a top line driver, right?
Well, he's the king of qualifying. So,
yeah.
And then you've got to look at the fact that he won the championship last year with only one victory. So, we've got 17 races this year. We've had 5 different winners in the first 7. So it's just very, very difficult to predict. And I think sport is entertainment, and that's what keeps people on the edge of their seats. Whereas in other championships, it's a little bit easier to predict who's going to be where. So that's why I think IndyCar, just for me right now, it's growing. It's on the crest of a wave. The Penske organization's done a wonderful job, the captain at the helm. And I just think that with the drivers that they've got in the series now, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind Alex Palou can win a world championship in Formula One if he was there right now. And that just shows the sort of attraction. You've got Palou, Pato O'Ward, you've got that new guard, you've got Callum Arlott, you've got
Marcus Ericsson coming up now is looking pretty sharp too, right?
Yeah, definitely. You've got
and then obviously and Marcus Armstrong as well. Marcus Armstrong,
But Ericsson has come across from Formula One, and a lot of the drivers, look at Romain Grosjean. He's not won a race for just almost a decade, and now they're able to compete at the front and do it with a smile on their face, albeit Romain wasn't smiling at the end of the the race of the weekend.
We'll get into the Detroit Grand Prix in a minute. I'm just curious to know, what's the appetite like for IndyCar over in the UK, and then because I've been seeing just a lot more journalists from Europe, really starting to get into IndyCar, and I've been seeing so much more coverage from journalists who I know who cover Formula One, really well, are now starting to look at IndyCar and starting to cover that as well. I mean, what's the appetite like over there?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the appetite is growing, and we can see that in the numbers year on year. It's fabulous having IndyCar on such a great provider. Sky's a wonderful facilitator for viewers to get involved. To give you an indication, not the Indy 500 that's just gone, because I haven't seen those numbers yet, but last year's Indy 500, we had more viewers for the 500 than we did for the last day of the US Open Golf. So, that shows how popular it is over here. And so, we're really pleased with the numbers. I know that IndyCar are really pleased with the demographic as well. We've got a wonderful audience, a spectrum in terms of male, female, whoever it is, getting involved and really enjoying it. And I always say on air, it's a community. People come together on the Sunday night, and we all watch IndyCar together. And I feel like I'm just watching it with my mates.
Awesome.
Everyone's tweeting in. We've got the hashtag, and it's a really, really friendly community, and everyone's just there enjoying themselves, which is quite rare on social media nowadays. It tends to be a bit more divisive.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I find with the IndyCar community is always really strong, and it's always, for the most part, fairly good conversation. For the Detroit Grand Prix, I mean, Alex Palou started on pole, winning. I mean, he's extended his lead in this championship, but at the end of the day, Tom, what did you think of this drive? Because, from my perspective, this was a driver who wants to win this championship, but such a tough race to win. The course was so technical. Any tiny little mistake, was going to end your race. And he was incredible this race. It just was. It was one of his best races, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, he must be bummed at the moment. No wonder he's leaving the team. Alex Palou for me has been about as dominant as you can be in IndyCar. We've just talked about the nuances between success and failure and how slender the margins are. But if you look at his performance at Indy as well, his first pole on an oval, but to wreck with VK in the pit lane and then be 28th or wherever he was, and then to come back he was so dominant in terms of that 500, and I've got no doubt had he stayed at the front, he would have been at the front. I just can't see any of the others having the car to beat him. So that was dominant. Obviously, he won on the street track, on the road course, at the beginning of the month of May, and then to come to Detroit, new circuit, no one's got a setup sheet to refer to. He's got all the depth in terms of talent on that grid to fight off. And if you look at his margin in qualifying, it was so staggeringly close. And then you've got Alex Palou, and Scotty Mack just brought it down on the last lap, but he was 3-4 tenths clear of everyone in second place. And then in the race, he looked like there was that moment where he had the problem with the gearbox and they had to go into the emergency mode, and he didn't panic. He didn't hit the wall, he didn't drop back. Okay, power got past him, but he just took his time, control of the lead. He's so calm and controlled in the car, and he's got so much confidence in terms of, he's not brash, he doesn't talk about it, he just trusts himself. And I think he goes about things in such a diligent and quiet manner. And when you see him off the circuit, he's he's just smiling, unassuming, just quiet, and yet on the track he's just this animal who can just, you know what I mean. You've driven, right? So you get the problem that he had with the gearbox.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean,
you see drivers get flustered, get emotive, get on the radio shouting, make a mistake, lose 2, 3, 4, 5 spots, then they crash with something. He doesn't deliver on any of that, and his emotional intelligence is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's good at keeping himself calm and focusing on the bigger picture, and it's difficult to do that, while you're in the race car, because it
sounds easy.
Yeah, it's such a stressful environment, and there's so much you're getting thrown at you with information, and you're also trying to manage a race at the same time. I mean, I think for Alex, he's going to be tough to beat from here on out. Like he was.
Well, someone's got to come to the table now, because his lead in the championship. If he has another 2 more rounds like this, it's going to be very difficult to bring that margin back. So you've got Ericsson behind him, you've got Newgarden, Pato's under. We talk about emotional intelligence and being under pressure. You look at the 2 races that Pato's just had. He's got to control the lead, to use that term a lot, but he's got to come back to the table and try and put it all together, because he's under real pressure now.
I don't know what he was thinking. Like, I know he didn't want to go a lap down.
He wouldn't have made the next. If there were 2 corners there, he was going so quickly, he wouldn't have made the next corner. There
was no way he was making that corner. There was just no way. It's a shame, really. I really like Pato, and I like how aggressive he is. He's one of those drivers I really enjoy watching.
Well, it's that Pato Montoya effect.
Yeah, he's got that wow factor, right? Like, it's just like, wow, what did this guy just do? This is incredible. And I mean, he just, there's that whole having to like think through the entire race and not getting too caught up in what's going on. I mean, would he have been put a lap down? I mean, for sure, but could he have gotten that back? Well, to see how the Detroit Grand Prix really started to turn out, I don't see why he couldn't have gotten that.
Look at Ericsson at Nashville. Everything can happen in IndyCar. So.
Yeah, 100%. Will Power, I mean, he's had an interesting season. I mean, like, coming into this, I really thought that Will was, because Will was dealing with a lot of stuff happening off track. His wife got really ill, and like he was having to deal with a lot of that, making sure she was okay, and like there was so much for him to manage, and then also coming in and like having to compete and perform at a high level. I have a massive amount of respect for Will Power, just for everything he's had to go through this year, and for him to started P7, he came home P2, he's up to 8th in the championship now, I believe. I think for me, he was really impressive. I don't know, what did you think, Tom?
Yeah, I think Will. There's still that willpower 2.0 that we talked about last year. You still see that this year. He's not that emotive guy screaming and shouting, and he seems very measured. He seems in control. And even before the Detroit Grand Prix, they were under pressure in terms of defending their championship points and their crown, and they knew that they had to do something different, and he just went about it in that manner that we just talked about with Alex Palou. He didn't overdrive, he didn't throw caution to the wind, he didn't. If you look at Pato, who just suddenly found 40 miles an hour of minimum speed that wasn't in the car, it's like, he didn't make those mistakes, and he looked really good value to push Palou all the way. It's just that Palou was so strong. I mean, there was no one that was going to beat him, but Will did a really good job of trying to make that happen, and he rolled his sleeves up and got his knees and elbows out at the end there when there was that contact between him and Dixon.
Yeah,
that was good down at turn 3, and then he returned the favour at the next right hand there, and I thought it was good. It was good to see Felix Rosenqvist get his first rostrum as well, because he's deserved that. He's been arguably the quicker driver in qualifying. He had the pole at Texas. He was really good. He looked like he had the rocket at IMS at the 500 in terms of the Arrow McLaren drivers. I know Pato was up there, but all the noise was about Felix for pole position, and in the race he looked really good. And, you know, he was good value at Detroit as well.
I'm interested to see how the team handles the situation between himself and Alex Rossi. I know Rossi said, you know, at the end of the race that they would handle it internally. But I'm saying, like, Alex is like, you know, he's saying, like, oh, yeah, we'll handle this internally. But it's but it's like, it's kind of like, well, hold on a second. You're new to the team, right? Like, it's like Felix has been there for quite a long time, and like he's going to race everybody.
And also, you know, I don't disagree with Felix. You know, Alex did make it difficult for him. He did start to move in the braking zone, and he did lean on Felix on the entry to the corner. And I don't think Felix drove him out. He was just compromised because obviously he entered the corner so tight. His natural arc's going to be, and if you're on the outside, you're going to get driven out. And I think Felix probably was a little bit aggrieved and didn't necessarily feel like lifting on the exit. And I think Felix said, well, listen, I don't want to go into it now, but he said his whole thing. But I think, you know, they're both reasonably fair drivers. And actually, when they watch that back, when Alex watches that back and says, okay, fair dues, like, I would have done the same in your situation there.
100%. Rossi actually has been really good since moving over to Arrow McLaren, and I'm not trying to take anything away from what Andretti Autosport has done, but the team as a whole and having Gavin Ward there and everything they've been accomplishing so far this season, I mean, we always talk about the big three where it's, you know, Penske, Ganassi, and Andretti, but I would say it's like you've got to factor in, you know, McLaren as, you know, in the top three, I would say, like in that big three. They've been spectacular, and I think Rossi has really turned things around here. I really do.
Well, he's taken quite a few punches this year, and he's still in it. You know, he's still churning out fifth places, or, you know, he's still in the points fight for the title, and he's taking those punches. So you have to say that when it all clicks there, he's going to be pretty formidable, because if he can churn out the results that he is at the moment with a new team, with limited testing, with, you know, taking a few hits, with just missing the bubble in qualifying, starting in the mid, you know, he's going about things in a sensible way. And when he gets a bit of luck, that's what I mean when it all clicks. Yeah. You know, when he just gets that bit of luck, I think he will be. And I thought it was coming his way when the heavens opened on the exit of turn 3, but he just didn't have the grip to hang on.
Kyle Kirkwood had a very impressive drive from P12, but then also, you know, he had the issue with the incident with Callum Ilott coming home to finish P6 for Kirkwood.
He was my pick.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Well, as well as Palou, I said, listen, you know, I think those two for driver of the day. You know, I think that was impressive from Kirkwood.
Yeah, it was interesting. Hey, Tom, like once he got that first win there at Long Beach, he's been really strong like since then, eh? Like, because if you think about like his performances from last year, and then, you know, granted, obviously being with AJ, and like I know the team is not really all the way there, but at the same time, I mean, you would think that would suck some of his confidence out of him. But moving over to Andretti, he's been really good, like really.
Yeah, and he doesn't let sort of little things phase him. And he was disappointed with qualifying, but he doesn't let that worry him. He's back out on a Sunday and going for gold. And you know, he reminds me of a young Joseph Newgarden in one way. You know, he's that way inclined.
Yeah, good point. Scott McLaughlin, you had mentioned him there off the top. He's been super impressive in qualifying. Some of the races, it hasn't really come together for him. I mean, obviously we had the incident that happened in St. Pete, and you know what I'm saying?
But still, got to keep talking about that.
But it's like, but you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like I'm waiting for this guy to put it all together. Like he's good
on those street tracks. I mean, that's
so impressive.
Because to come from driving a big, heavy V8 with a roof over your head, and to to then make the transition into a single seater and learn how the aero works and how you roll speed. It's a completely different way of driving. You've almost got to unlearn everything that you've spent your whole career developing. And then to do that, I think's really impressive. And to do it in a field that we've been talking about how strong that field is and how many drivers there are that are capable of winning all over the world, whatever the series. You know, he for me has been a seriously, serious surprise package. And I've always said, I think it's easier to go the other way, you know, from aero to, you know, driving something with a roof and you know, because things slow down and you can sort of, if you're patient, you can learn to wait for the weight transfer and that kind of stuff. But it's harder to trust aero and to be go to Barber, for example, and actually trust the aero and be committed, or Road America. And you know, he's been that. Okay, he's great on the street tracks, but he's been excellent on the ovals. You know, look at Texas, and you know, his IMS pace is really strong. I love him off the track as well, and I love what he's done, that sort of bromance with Joseph Newgarden, because he's almost brought Newgarden out of this shell. That, you know, not that he was in a shell, but it's like this sort of cheeky chap, naughty character that Newgarden's been hiding away, and now Scotty Max kind of arrived, and they're like playing up together. And then you've got Will Power, who's like the dad, you know, with like their sort of, you know, the hand on the hips kind of thing.
I think, I always saw Joseph as he was always really buttoned up, and he was always there for the sponsors and making sure he was clean cut. And then, that's a good point that you make about McLaughlin bringing Joseph out of his shell, because I do agree with that, actually. And I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's a good point that you make. I think for Detroit, I think McLaughlin feels that Grosjean might have done him a bit dirty in Detroit, as I think he feels like he probably could have got away with the top 5, but Grosjean, his collision with Grosjean, I think it was in turn 1 or something like that.
There was always going to be an incident with a car coming out the pits there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There was always going to be one, and it just happened to be those two. I mean, Roman's got 2 speeds, flat out and stop, and Scotty Max pretty similar as well. So those two sort of fighting for the same bit of real estate, it just it's never going to work out.
I think I like texted you or something, and you were said like, I hope this race isn't chaos. And I'm like, oh dude, that pit exit on a green flag is going to be chaos.
And it was for those two.
What'd you think about that? I mean, I've never seen a split down the middle for a pit lane before in my entire life, but I mean, it seemed like it worked out pretty good, Tom. I don't know. One of
his moments was in qualifying, I think, with Carl Kirkwood, and he got into it. He nearly took his front wing off.
Yeah. Was he? I'm trying to think, like, if he had to go into pit lane because he was just like so on the limit, he couldn't bring the car back for that second final turn there or whatever. Crazy, man. And then I think, like, in the race, if I remember correctly, Ferrucci, he was but he was pitted, like his pit box was so weird too, because he was right at pit in, and it looked it looks so awkward for him to get into it. And at one point it looks like he literally blew right past it and had to go back out, do another tour to come back in to get pits, because man, it was that was wild. I've never seen anything like it. But I mean, the track as a whole, it's definitely IndyCar-ish. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's basically suck it up and send it in speed. I spoke to one or two of the British drivers, and they said it's actually was really good fun to drive. It's just that when you had the other cars around you, it was really problematic. But if you were just on one lap by yourself, it was a really good challenge. But it was tough. I mean, those bumps into the braking zone at turn 3 were, and 6 and 7 just caught so many people out. It was rattle your bones. Like I remember how I did 100 laps around there.
Oh my God,
I've got a metal back. There's no way I would have done 5 laps around there.
No, you'd be so beat up. Like you'd be bruised. Yeah. You'd be bruised real good at that track when you're coming.
I don't know how Marcus Armstrong's doing it, because he's out the car. As a driver, you can train as hard as you like, but match fitness is so important. Being in the car all the time helps. He's out the car for weeks at an end, and then he's going to get in the car, and suddenly you've got Detroit, an absolute bone shaker, is going to rattle your fillings out. And then, he's a little guy and he's used to power. He's like,
that's so good, man. I'd be curious for Marcus if he decides to run a full season of IndyCar. Like, I know he wasn't too big on the ovals and stuff, but
he definitely wants to do those ovals because Taku's not in the car yet. That's not a done deal. So the rumor is he's going to be in for Gateway. And
yeah, I heard about that. I'd be curious to know about next season if he does the full season, because I know like sometimes when some of the European drivers do tend to come over and to do IndyCar, they always kind of shy away from doing the ovals. But then everyone's right, and it is, and it is. But like you can see it with Grosjean. I think would be a perfect example where Grosjean misses those ovals and he comes back and he kind of surveys the landscape, sees what they're like, and then once he starts doing them, he gets that confidence up. But
I think you got to dip your toe in and walk around the pool a few times because we are petrified of the ovals. It's so different to anything that we've ever done, and it's it's gladiatorial. I mean, for to trust the car and trust everyone around you, and the speeds are just it's like a telephone number in terms of the speeds. It's like nothing you've ever experienced, and it's a bit like MotoGP or the Isle of Man TT. There's still that element of danger there, and I think drivers in this era that they're not necessarily conditioned to sort of adopt that sort of that risk. You see lots of drivers that drop out of IndyCar. You've got to look at Max Chilton, Conway. People that have dropped out and said, "Listen, I'll do the road course, but I don't fancy the oval anymore," and that's fair enough.
Who's impressed you the most so far this season? Like who's really stood out? I mean, take away like Alex Palou, the Will Powers, some of the drivers we've already spoken about who have been super impressive, but outside of them, who else?
I think for me, obviously Alex has been brilliant because he's had to bounce back from that pressure cooker that was last year, and that was really unpleasant and a really difficult place for him and everyone. And he is such a likable guy. He's been incredibly resilient to sort of bounce back. I think Carl Kirkwood is doing a good job, and you measure him up against Colton Herta, which for me has been there's something not quite right there. He's not been the same guy, and what went on with losing Brian to Carl, and there's something not quite right with him, and you can see it in his driving, you can see it in his demeanour, you can see it off the track. It just doesn't look like it's quite clicking. But in order for Carl to come in and challenge Romain, challenge Colton. Romain Grosjean's as quick as they come over a lap. We know how quick Colton is over a lap in an IndyCar. So I think he's done a wonderfully good job. I think Callum Ilot's always bubbling away, but he has such a difficult month in May. His sort of giant killing performances at the beginning of the year are like distant memory because it was just it was torturous to watch at times when he was driving that car around. And he was so close to making it through the group stages in Detroit, and if he'd have been in the Fast 12, you stand half a chance then. And so, Callum was just missed it by a smidgen in Detroit, but then had that incident at 3 where you just think, oh no. So it's been a difficult few races for Callum, but I think he's the real deal as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think Callum's awesome. His teammates been really impressive to me. Augustine Canapino. I didn't expect him to be like this good. First time speaking with him back in, I think it was like February or January, February when I did a media day for IndyCar, and like he had only been speaking English for like a month, and it was really good, right? I'm like, oh my god! I'm like, this guy can actually really speak English. He's only been doing it for a month. That's incredible. And then once I saw him in preseason testing, and then his first race, and then his second, and then like he's just been building this confidence, and he's just I don't know. He's just a driver who's really stood out to me because
when I was talking about Scotty Mack earlier on, I actually really rolled into Canapino because he's been arguably as impressive because Junko's Hollinger, they're still learning their trade. Yes, they don't want to be called a small team. They almost find that insulting now because they're not a small team. They've invested heavily and they are growing, but they're still learning. They're still at the beginning of their learning curve. So they might be a bigger team, but they're still learning. And he is as far down the sort of, if you look at how far he's had to come with his learning curve, then, he's very much still learning. They've got a young driver leading the team in Callum who's still learning. So, I think he's been phenomenal. And had he been in a Penske car or a Chip Ganassi car, he really would have, really surprised us even more, I think,
Last thing for you before we take off. If you're running Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, what do you do?
They'll be scratching their heads so hard at the moment. I
feel so bad for them.
And Graham was broken in his interview after Detroit. Someone said in my ears from the gallery that's the voice of a broken man. He genuinely, off the back of everything that happened, and it was painful. At IMS to watch them fight it out on bump day, and then to come. Jack Harvey, he's a British F3 champion. You look at what he achieved at Mayor Shank. He's not 3 seconds off of the front runners. He's a proper peddler, and so's Graham, and they're nowhere near, and they're consistently nowhere near, and they've got some big names there, Bordeaux, and they've recruited heavily on the engineering side. I can't work it out. I mean, it's almost, we talk about how tight the championship is. They're off the back of it. They're so far behind.
I always wonder if they get lost, because I know they've done some Arrow running and stuff like that. I always wonder if they get sort of lost in that, because it was, Graham kind of alluded to. So, and so did Bobby. They kind of alluded to something similar during the 500, like during qualifying. And I just wonder if they just maybe have gotten lost in that data, because the thing with the IndyCar is, what's your shock package like? What's your spring package like? And, what's your damper package looking like? And so I don't know if they maybe not gone away from that, but maybe not invested as much in that as they possibly could. And then, they've also got that new factory they brought online, and maybe some things got lost in translation, switching everything over, but I don't know. I feel bad for the team because they do work really hard. It's not like the team is just sitting on their ass.
They're trying hard to put a smile on their faces. And, you're never going to go about it and be successful if you give up. So they haven't given up. But you're right, though. They've lost that sort of base. They don't seem to have that base where you can build upon. Every time they turn up, it's gone wrong before they've even rolled it out the truck, and then they don't know. They were saying at Indianapolis, why are we throwing these why are we doing these changes? Like what we're just throwing changes at the car. Where are we going with this kind of thing? And they do seem lost, and it's sad to see because for Jack's fighting for his career now.
Oh yeah. I feel bad for Jack too, because it's like you said, he's a good driver. He's got the talent, man. It doesn't make any sense. But Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. Let everybody know where they can find you on social media and what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter predominantly. I'm not cool enough to be on Instagram, although I am. I'm at TV Talker on Instagram, but I'm at Tom Gaymor, Gaymor on Twitter. You'll find me predominantly on there.
Thanks very much, man. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this. That's Tom Gaymor. I'm Tim Hauraney. You can get me on social media at Tim Hauraney. If you want more Nailing the Apex, you can get that wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also head over to YouTube and watch us on there. Tom, thanks again. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, buddy.